Hello and welcome to the final episode of Ask the Cricketer in 2024, and we're going to reflect upon day 4 of the third test between New Zealand and England from Hamilton. And to do so, I'm joined by Cameron Ponsonby, live from Seddon Park. Cam, where's your head at after the manner in which that test, and I guess England men's year, came to an end?
I think the day went almost exactly as expected. A little bit of resistance from Root and Bethel. Bethel probably was the batter of the most approved still because he's the youngest, least experienced. And then it all kind of fell in a heap as everyone tried to hit a six bigger than each other. It kind of sums up England's year a little bit in that it's the kind of downside to the high octane cricket that so often provides entertainment. You do kind of have to take these days, maybe, or maybe you don't have to take these days and you can say, come on, guys, like show a little bit more. I think the point, you raised it to me before we recorded, and also it's been spoken about by a few people, that this is England's third heaviest defeat ever in the history of Test cricket, but it's only their second heaviest defeat this year. So they've lost by 423 runs today, and they lost by, I think it was 434 in Rajkot at the very start of the year. So it finishes with a 17 test year, the most they've ever played alongside 2016, 9 wins, 8 losses. Yeah, that sounds about right for where this team is. A bit of a damp squib finish in terms of we knew what the result was going to be for a long time, but we saw Jacob Bethel score some more pretty runs. That's always enjoyable. We saw Will O'Rourke bowling an incredibly high quality spell, which was very exciting. We saw Ollie Pope getting out scooping, which I reckon if he had his time again, he wouldn't have done.
There's going to be, I think, if I'm sensing the tone of the initial reaction to this outcome from a sort of England perspective, that there's going to be a fair amount of anger in the comments. Is that completely justified? How do we kind of see this? Because on the one hand, heavy defeat, as you say. On the other hand, it was a dead rubber. It's at the end of the busiest test year. They've never played more tests in a single calendar year. Lots of players playing finishing their first year as Test cricketers, and they looked like they were as well. I would understand, let's not downplay the fact that we're a week out from, the festivities in the UK starting, and these players have got ahead of them a period at home whereby they're actually going to have a sustained period of rest, right, before they actually have to do anything else as well. Like, I think anyone who's nearly signing off, would have half an eye on the period where they don't have to do anything. Sort of human nature. How do we kind of view this then, given all of those complexities around it?
I think one thing I'd say, I know I've cited the 400 run losses thing. I think it's a bit of a misnomer to point towards those and be like, oh, they're awful, they're terrible. It's kind of built into the manner in which they play that when it goes wrong, their defeats will be heavier. Because the point of what they're doing by scoring at a higher rate is to manufacture more time in the game. On the plus side, that's to give you more time to take 20 wickets, as you as the team trying to score your runs faster. On the flip side, if you score your runs faster and get bowled out, that gives more time for the opponent to just keep batting and keep going and keep going. So Rajkot's actually a better example than this one. Rajkot, England still got, I think, about 350 in their first innings. But they got it in 76 overs or something incredible. And so then India, when they come to bat again, they have no pressure to force the game along at any point. They can just build and build and build a lead. And that's what we saw yesterday. Why this result on paper is so extreme, whereas having been here, it just felt like one team, it felt like a one innings match, basically. Like, okay, England have collapsed once. That is going to define the game. But because it all happens so quickly, then New Zealand can bat at a tempo where they don't have to force anything. And rather than having to declare when the lead is 550 because they want to give themselves 4 sessions to bowl England out, we were debating about whether they should be giving themselves 7 sessions. Like, there was so much time in the game. Yes, England got bowled out for 140, but they got bowled out for 140 in 34 overs. So it didn't even have a blip on the game's radar. It meant that New Zealand could build up this massive lead. So yes, I understand how it'll be pointed towards that England suffered an embarrassing heavy defeat, New Zealand's joint highest ever. But I think that's more synonymous with just a one innings blowout as opposed to a complete and utter domination over the course of a match. Is that being too rose-tinted and kind to England? I don't think so. That's really just how it felt here, that the game was done after the first innings and we knew how it was going to play out. It's not the first time a game's played out in that way. It won't be the last. And yeah, I think there's always going to be a bit of irritation shown towards this England team. And I feel it as well. They fly in the face of convention. They are both in your face and very bigging up of themselves. And that's irritating regardless of who it would be. I remember going with Jacob Bethel's selection this series. I really wanted it to work for the player and the person, and I wanted it to work because he's such a fun cricketer to watch, and I got to see him a bit beforehand. But I was almost annoyed. I was like, how have they got this right again? Like, how do they keep taking the mickey out of cricket, and they keep getting it right? And so they're always going to wind people up. And results like this are kind of, what's the word, light to the flame or fire to the flame of that saying. I can't remember what it is, of the critics, basically. And yeah, England can take their medicine for this test match, but if you're going to have your big blow up, have it when you're 2-0 up in a 3-match series. Yes, there's a World Test Championship, but England don't care about it. So we can criticise that bit another time.
If you are going to annoy people, at least annoy the right people. And that's
Quite right.
England absolutely do that. Are England a better team, test team, than they were at the start of the year?
Good question. Yes, I think they are. And I was having this debate with Stefan Schemmelt of the BBC yesterday because we were walking back to the Airbnb we're sharing. And I think they are, just because they now have the potential. I think they're of a similar standing. I think they're not. Let me rephrase that. I think if the team now played against the team at the beginning of the year in some kind of magical, hypothetical realm, I don't think there'd be that much difference between them. But I think this team now has room to get better, whereas the other one didn't. The other one was Johnny Bairstow, Ben Foakes, James Anderson, known quantities. Whereas this one's Jacob Bethel, Harry Brook. I know Brook was there, but he wasn't playing in India. Bryden Carse, Gus Atkinson. People who have started and look to be at the same level and producing the same type of results, but they have room to keep on improving. You also have the chance of Mark Wood and Jofra Archer returning from fitness. Yes, there are question marks over the team, but I think the regeneration of this 11 does deserve credit in a more traditional manner, not in a case of, wow, aren't England changing cricket, and wow, isn't everything amazing? In terms of England had some problems they wanted to address. They wanted to solve their wicketkeeper issue, which, even if you didn't think it was an issue, it was a debate. Do we pick Bairstow? Do we pick Foakes? Now it's just Jamie Smith is a lock. When, in terms of the opening batters, yes, it was Crawley and Duckett, and Crawley's come round again, so there is a bit of question marks, but they had some solidity and they had a strong running partnership there. We can run through the entire team. Your question marks are spinner, who plays out of Pope and Bethel, and then there's a third one, Crawley. And I think that's a pretty standard place to be for any team, and a place of greater stability than they were or had a year ago.
Yeah, it definitely feels like if they're not a better 11, they're definitely a better group. It feels like more of a. I think the framework around them is stronger, even if laced within it is not an 11 that's performing as effectively as they could necessarily be. What about New Zealand? Sort of same sort of question for them.
I think with New Zealand, they have a very exciting seam attack kind of ready to go. They're going to be a strange team to watch over the next year because they currently only have 5 tests scheduled for the whole of 2025. They've got 2 away to Zimbabwe, and then they've got 3 at home to the West Indies, which is only 3 at home to the West Indies because they added a test. There's a rumour, and I think we said this on a previous show, that they might add a couple of tests away to South Africa off the back of the Zimbabwe tour, but that's so early in the kind of conversation piece, it might just not happen. But despite playing relatively little cricket next year, you kind of know what you're getting with them. From the seam attack, you have O'Rourke, you have Matt Henry, you have Nathan Smith, who sat out this time. You have Ben Sears, who debuted against Australia earlier this year, and everyone over here raves about, says he's the business, he's serious. You also then have a 5th seamer in Jacob Duffy, Ben Lister, Blair Tickner. So they have quite a deep stable of fast bowling options. if they are going to be away in South Africa or Zimbabwe and they want to play a spinner, Mitchell Santner's such a complete cricketer now that they can always call upon him as and when they wish. Their batting lineup is brittle. The joke in New Zealand is it's actually harder to get out of the New Zealand team than it is to get in it. And so with those people who are in the top six and failing, who have had difficult times in Blundell, Conway, Latham to an extent, but he's the skipper, will they keep backing those horses? That'll be interesting to see. But I still think that my biggest irritation for this series is that New Zealand forgot how to field in the first 2 days of the series, because it was just a complete aberration from a professional cricket team. And you take that aside, if you change that narrative, the whole context of the series changes. I think New Zealand are a good team, and I think they massively undersold themselves in the first two tests of this series, and mainly the first one.
I also feel that New Zealand, across the three tests, had an 11 to beat England convincingly in this series. They just never played together.
Yeah, I mean, I feel what you're saying there, Nick, is that Tim Southey was playing. I feel like that's a little bit where you're heading to, but
No, I just think Glenn Phillips just isn't up to it.
Right, okay, got you. Yeah, Southey was. Oh, hey, it's all ended well. New Zealand have won the match, but yeah, he was like tangibly. It's so rare that you're at an elite sporting event and you can see someone. Like you can see it being a level below everything else. Normally, the margins are so fine, and someone might be going at 5 and over, and someone might be going at 3, and you can't quite tell. You go, oh, they must have missed their length a couple times, like a few overs ago, that got cut for 4. But with Southey, like he was obviously targeted by the England team, and he was obviously just slower than the rest of the bowlers on display. And had they been able to have that relentless seam bowling attack going over and over again for 3 matches, then yeah, that makes a big difference. And feel a bit horrible talking about a bloke who's just retired and walking off to the sunset and being like, "Yeah, you shouldn't have been playing, mate." But no, it was it might be true. I don't know, but I feel mean saying it, so I'm gonna brush over it.
Yeah, I think it's more that, and I'm not saying there's an 11 works with all of these components in, but clearly Nathan Smith was one of the best 3-seamers they had available to them. Clearly, Will Young, not being able to find a way to play Will Young in all 3 of these tests, having done what he did in India, was clearly a problem. They also couldn't find a way for Mitchell Santner to play, more than the 1 test that he played 2. And Devon Conway was really out of form, and then he's on paternity leave for this 3rd test, so couldn't play. Like, there's a lots of you find a solution to all those issues, and I realise there isn't necessarily a silver bullet that does that. Then suddenly you have an 11 you can reflect upon and think, actually, they would have given England the best of what England produced in those first 2 tests, albeit with some poor fielding assisted. They would have given them a real battle. And I think that was what we anticipated, I think, before this series. I know you get one-sided scorelines, and we can get drawn to that really easily. And you made some really good points about how the direction of travel towards a heavy outcome can often be a better way of kind of analysing a test rather than just looking at the raw numbers. But actually, I think that New Zealand finding a way to field their best 11, and I don't think they did that in any of the 3 games they played, will have been a way of making this series really utterly compelling, and the one I think that we kind of expected at the start of it.
Yeah, and to be honest, it shows, without wanting to be one-eyed about England, it shows the importance of Ben Stokes in the England 11 and the concern they have moving forward with his hamstring injury, because New Zealand could have ticked all those bowlings from those points from a bowling attack perspective if they had a seam bowling all-rounder, because then they could have gone, for the sake of argument, Smith, O'Rourke, Henry, Santner as your kind of main 4 bowlers, and then you have your 4th seamer in your batting lineup. New Zealand's 2 all-rounders in their top 7 are Ravindra and Phillips, who bowl spin. And so from 8 down to 11, you kind of want 4 options to bowl seam because you're in New Zealand and it's green, and that's the kind of manner of victory, or the path to victory you want to take. Had they been able to strike that balance, or had they been able to had they just backed 3 seamers and a spinner, yes, I feel like we would have seen a different game, and we would have seen a better series for it, because I feel relieved. I feel relieved that go back a month or 3 weeks or whatever, and you read the previews, And we were saying, like, we don't know, like, really don't know what we're going to expect from this series, because India, they've just beaten India in the greatest series win of all time, but they've lost to Sri Lanka and they lost to Australia, and like, they don't have that. They could be an amazing seam attack, but they might not. But they've got a brittle batting lineup in England. Like, who knows with England? And that's kind of what we got, but it wasn't at like the level we were hoping it was going to be. But nevertheless, it was a fun series. I think watching cricket in New Zealand, if I ever get the opportunity to watch cricket in New Zealand and I come away saying it was anything other than very nice, then I think that's the time to fire me, to move me on, to be like, this is the point. It's wasted on you. It's been a great trip.
Excellent, thank you for that. Well, we might just do it anyway.
Yeah, yeah, it's fair. Yeah.
Just a final point, actually, I want to make on Will O'Rourke, who was awesome in this test. Interesting that he's submitted himself for a couple of IPL auctions, not been picked up. I wonder if he's still open to going, given we know that, you know, replacement players, etc., and injuries come in. Whether there's a few owners looking at what he did today and what he did yesterday, and wondering whether he's worth a tilt as a wildcard option, a low cost wildcard option for that comp if a window opens up.
100%. I mean, say the IPL auction was tomorrow, I reckon Will O'Rourke will be feeling pretty confident about getting a deal. His spell today was so much fun and a real kind of like sit up and, oh, right, okay, like, this is exciting, this is quick. He hit all of Bethel, Pope and Root in various different bodily positions. He immediately, when he faced with Brook charged at him first ball, swung and missed, and his just natural pace and natural ability had Harry Brook, who scored not even roughly, like genuinely thousands of runs in New Zealand. If it's not 1,000, I'm sorry. And he had immediately changing his tact against him. He had the absolute wood over Jacob Bethel today, who was on about 2 off 24 balls from his spell, leaping around. Because basically Will O'Rourke was a bit of a late developer, and he has this slightly ugly action where he leans over and pushes the ball into the right-hander. He says himself that his inconsistency and his inability to be consistent has actually ended up being a strength of his, because it makes his better ball even better, because people are like, I don't know where this kid's going to bowl. And then when it's good, it's really good. And you put that in an IPL context of where kind of a variability is so intrinsic and important in T20 bowling, your kind of natural variations as a 90-mile-an-hour seamer, rather than being a weakness, could then turn into a strength. So Will O'Rourke, he's the reason I'm sad New Zealand only have 5 tests currently for next year, because he looks proper and he looks like it'll be really exciting for years to come. Fingers crossed.
Indeed. Well, that's a nice way to sign off. As I mentioned at the top, this is our sort of final episode of this form in 2024. We've had over 80 episodes in India, the Caribbean, English summer, Pakistan, and now in New Zealand as well with you. Just a quick thanks to anyone who submitted a question over the last 12 months. Anyone who's submitted a patronising comment over the last 12 months. Anyone who's watched any of the videos or listened to any of the audio on the podcast feed as well, whether you've poked fun at George's sunburn or one of Cam's hats, like, thanks so much for your engagement. You kind of make this show happen. Otherwise, we'd just be chatting rubbish to each other, which, to be honest, we do that anyway, even when people do submit questions. So it's a problem either way. And look, we're looking forward to 2025 as much as anyone. It's a bumper year, naturally. We're not allowed to mention what's actually going on until it starts, but we'll get there. We're too far ahead, apparently, to look that far ahead. And so it's been fantastic. And okay, Cam, thanks for your contributions over the last couple of weeks as well. You've been a welcome addition to the output. As you say, you've had a good time, and we'll keep a check on that assessment as the tours go on.
Do our best. No, thank you very much for having me. I was well, I think we got some Chris Woke slandering in the first episode, and I think that's all I ever really wanted. Just to balance out the powers that be with well, I'll happily return the keys to George for whenever he may be back with the next episode.